G'day, and welcome to Shattered, the podcast. We apologise for being a little bit off air for the last week. I just had a number of speaking engagements that I had to go to, so we kind of had to take a back seat with the podcast. We are back full force this week. Marriage and mental illness. It's going to be a solo episode that's coming out on Wednesday. Today, though, we're going to talk about the fact that it's okay to not be okay sometimes. All that and more coming up on Shattered the Podcast today.
Welcome to Shattered the Podcast.
Sharing the lived experience of mental illness on
A father,
a mother.
A family.
Let's go.
Let's go.
Let's go!
Let's go.
we live in a world where it can be difficult to show how we really feel about things. We live in a world where, we live in an Instagram world where everybody seems to be happy. Everybody seems to be getting along. Everybody seems to be doing great. And it's gotten to a point where at times we look at people that aren't like that. We kind of wonder what the hell's wrong with them. This week I spoke at a number of different schools. There was a young lady who, during a story, had to leave. She was stressed by what was going on and she needed to go. Now, at every talk that we give at a school, we explain beforehand that it's okay if you need to leave. We get that talking about mental illness can be tough for some people. After the session, it's our duty of care to just discuss the matter briefly with the teacher. Are you aware of this student? Are you aware of the situation? Is it under control? Is somebody following up with them? That's all we have to do. We just have to make sure that everybody that was in the session was okay. I will often, at the end of a session, say to everybody, is everybody good? Is everybody okay? This little girl, I was about to leave the school and she came running up to me and you could tell she was kind of distraught. And I felt really uncomfortable because I'm a man. She's a high school girl. I kind of was looking around like I'm not with any of my colleagues. I don't know that I can see a teacher. A teacher came around the corner and was right there. So when this young lady started to speak to me, I felt that I was in a safe enough position to do that, and I was accountable enough. There were people watching. Teachers were close. We were outside the front office. And she tried to apologize for walking out of the class. And she didn't understand why I was confused. She kept saying, I'm so sorry. I'm like, what are you sorry for? She said, I had to leave your class. I'm like, that's okay. She's like, no, that was really rude. It was difficult having to assure this young woman that the fact that I'd seen her not be okay with something wasn't a big issue. And it's something in this world that the biggest stigma that we have is this self-stigma. Again, this stigma against ourselves. If I'm not being everything that I should be every single moment of the day, there's something wrong with me. Now, I've learned that at times in my mental illness, I will need to take breaks. I will need to take time out. I will need to get away from people. And there are times where I have to interact with people and I am not okay. So I'm not my usual flamboyant, effervescent self. I might be quiet. I might be a little bit sullen. I might be withdrawn. I might have to excuse myself. But I'm kind enough to myself now, and I've learned this through listening to other people's stories, is I'm kind enough now to myself to not beat myself up or see those times as being failures. I just see them as times. This young lady, I just kept reassuring her that, yes, in her eyes, she had walked out in the middle of a session that somebody was speaking about mental illness and it was rude and it was going to crush me. Well, the point is, we wouldn't be at schools if our organisation thought that we would get crushed by that kind of reaction. They wouldn't let us go in there if we were psychologically fragile. And I'm grateful to the organisation for that. But just reassuring this young lady that, mate, you had a moment, you did what you needed to do, and I admire you for that. I often used to tell a story about, we had a guy when I was working with people with disability who used to get his feces. He'd lie on his bed and he'd poop himself, and then he'd play with the poop. He'd put it in his ears, he'd put it in his mouth, he'd roll it into little balls, he'd drop it down behind the bed, and he would paint the walls with his poo. Obviously, this is something that we tried to avoid as much as possible. He was a little boy with cerebral palsy who was in a wheelchair. And I got to tell you, I'd cleaned up after this kid a couple of times. Nobody, we went to incredible lengths to try and stop this, giving him an enema before he had lay on his bedtime because he was in a wheelchair. And when you extrapolate that, when you think about what kind of control does a person with an intellectual disability, who's also got a physical disability and is confined to a wheelchair, has very to little communication, does things when we say. We forget a kid sitting there watching a TV show. Oh, I've got 5 kids to bath before dinner. It's time to go and do that now. It took a stretch to tell people to hang on, learn about, is the kid watching a show? Is he in the middle of a show? If he is, let him finish his show. Why wouldn't you do that? We tried to give this kid every freedom that we possibly could. But the one freedom that he had was at the end of the day, in the afternoon, when he asked to be out of the wheelchair and lie on his bed, the one choice that he could make is to soil himself and then play with it. This was in a unit of 14 to 15 clients. There was 3, maybe 4 staff members. We were flat out. We couldn't spend every moment of every day with every client. There was not the money, the time, or the ability to do that. It would have been our preference to, but it was the reality. Things happen in the home that we couldn't control. And one of them was when our little man would go on what I used to call a creative fart session, where he would poop himself, he'd slide off his bed, he'd paint the walls, he'd roll it into little balls, stick it in his nose, in his ears. It was something that was in his control, and quite frankly, he enjoyed it. Now, we used to tell a story about a woman on her first day. Generally, on a person's first day, staff would be sent to clean up one of this guy's creative fart sessions. I never did that to a staff member, but I was on shift when it happened. I always thought it was cruel. So we all get our assignments. We all walk out of the office. I go to one end of the house. People go to others. This woman is sent by another colleague into this little boy's room. She took one look in the room, turned around, walked back to the office. I'm sort of walking out of the office. She's walking in. I'm wondering, it's the beginning of a shift. What's up? Doesn't matter. She's obviously got an agenda. She picks up her handbag and she leaves. We all started laughing because sometimes things are so bad that you have to laugh. Now, we were a staff member down for the rest of this shift. It was going to make our life a lot harder. The tempo of our work was going to be a lot faster. The care that we could give, the attention that we could give would be a lot less, simply because we were now another staff member down. And we were laughing. And we used to tell the story of just the shock on this woman's face. And believe it or not, you can make this into a funny story. I used to be able to. I can't now because I have nothing but respect for this woman. She walked down the hall. She was confronted with something that very few people will ever see. And when you're not in that world, that is a staggering sight. Even you just hearing about it is probably making you gag. I know people that it has done that too. This idea that somebody plays with their poop, sticks it in their nose, their ears, their mouth, rolls it into little balls, tries to hide it so he can play with them later. But in our world, that was normal. That was just another day at work. And at work, we used to frown on people that were weak, frown on staff members that didn't make the grade, frown on staff members like this woman who now I admire. She took one look at a situation that she knew she wasn't going to be able to cope with, and she just walked out. She didn't care what we thought or said or did. She realized that this was a situation that was not something she could deal with, and she walked away. In short, it was okay for her to not be okay. If I had had that wisdom at certain points in my working career, I would have stepped back from my work. I would have moved up to management sooner, to higher management that takes you completely away from the clients. I held off doing that because I didn't see it as valued work. To me, to serve was the work. The value that I had was that when I got home from work every day, I made a difference in somebody's life, somebody that I could see. In many ways, it was a little bit selfish. It was also naive to think that I could do that forever in the heightened environment that I was expected to do it in, which was with clients of high needs, both physically, mentally, intellectually, and dealing with violence in the workplace. If I had have had the sense that this woman had to see some things and go, you know what? I'm getting to a point where I can't deal with this. I'm getting to a point where this is getting too much for me. And unfortunately, I didn't do that. And I kept pushing myself and I kept putting me in situations that were damaging my mental health because I thought I was noble and because I thought I was tough enough. I worked with some of the most incredible women in the world, men and women, but mostly women. Women that would go through the same situations that I would go through, that would experience the same violence that I would go through, and it never seemed to affect them. Well, it never seemed to affect them because none of us talked about our mental illness. None of us talked about our mental health. None of us talked about the fact that this stuff might be bad for us mentally. It wasn't even a thought in our heads that it might be. I use an example in schools where I was walking up a set of stairs at the beginning of my workday. And for some reason, I kind of stood to the side. I must have heard or seen something, I don't know what. But I kind of jumped out the way. I jumped to the side of the corridor. And I'm glad that I did because a microwave came flying past my head down the stairs and smashed on the bottom of the stairs. Now, if I hadn't moved, I know that I would have been damaged at the least, possibly killed. And I asked this group of students how they would react to it. I said, well, what would you do? One kid, oh, you get really concerned. Another kid, oh, you call the police. One kid, you get angry. And all those things would be valid responses. My response, though, was that glass has now been broken, so I can't let clients go down the stairs anymore. I need to get upstairs as quickly as I can and assess the situation. Is the client that threw the microwave in any danger? What's the story on the power cords? When he ripped it out of the microwave, did he rip the power cords? Is there exposed electricity? Is there somebody upstairs hurt? To not even take a deep breath, count to 10. It was instant. I went into this clinical mode where I now need to intervene. What are my steps? Risk assessment. Broken glass on the floor, bottom of the stairs. I can shut the door at the top of the stairs and lock it. Problem solved for now. Gonna have to deal with that problem later. Next problem, go upstairs. The client is angry, but there's nobody else there. Nobody's hurt. Nobody's damaged. Nobody's lying in a pool of blood. I just have this client to sort out. Okay. Assessment. What is the risk here? Are they still angry? If they are, what do I have to do to help them? Can I see what has made them angry? These were the thoughts that were going through my head, not the fact that, wow, I'd almost just been killed. I'd almost just at least ended up in hospital, possibly with brain damage, possibly dead. Couldn't think about that. I didn't think about that. At the end of my shift, I went home and I watched TV until I was tired enough to fall asleep. I didn't talk to anyone about that issue. In fact, it wasn't even that bad an issue. I mean, it was bad because we had to replace a microwave, but all in all, that was a pretty good day. I didn't end up in hospital. None of my clients or fellow staff members ended up in hospital. So it was a good day. I couldn't know that each and every violent incident that I was going through, that one included, even though that was very mild, were affecting my mental health. But there was something in me that was just, I cannot allow the thought of the fact that I may not be dealing with this to show through to anybody. Even telling my wife that I'm finding it hard at work, it just didn't occur to me to talk about that stuff. Because that was my job, that was my life, that was what I'd chosen to do. And anything that happened to me because of my choices was my fault and mine alone. And I was tough. Thing is, as tough as you want to be, the toughest person, put them on under enough pressure, trauma, they will crack. Strength has got nothing to do with it. Mind power has got nothing to do with it. Now, I started showing symptoms of my mental illness before I got hurt. And the thing is, I ignored it. And I equate it to, imagine you had a broken foot. Would you keep walking on it? Take one step, doesn't hurt, take another step. Oh, that hurts a lot. I can't stand up. Well, I just have to forget it and I have to keep moving forward. No, you're going to stop and you're going to take care of that injury. You're going to recognize it for what it is. You're going to take steps to get it fixed. Why is it when it comes to mental illness, we prefer to say, you know what? I'm going through some stuff, but I can deal with it. I'll get through it. The truth is, you may be able to get through it. And if you can, God bless you. I'm excited for you. But give that very same person enough stress over a prolonged period of time, and they don't do anything to address it, they're going to fall apart. There's Are You Okay Day. I'm actually advocating for there to be a I'm Not Okay Day. A day where somebody can stand up and say, I'm not going to wait for people to ask me. I'm just going to tell you that I am not okay and I need some help. But what are the chances of that? What do you think the chances are that that might actually come about? I think it's minuscule. I think people would laugh it off the table. But people laughed off Are You OK Day when it first came around. I remember people talking about that like it was the biggest joke in the world. What kind of idiot would come up with Are You OK Day? Now it's become one of the most important days in the mental health calendar because it's opened up that conversation. Imagine if there was an I'm Not OK Day. Wow. What a mind stretch that would be. But how far would we have come if we allowed something like that to happen? The thing is, there's going to be hard times. Mental illness or no, there's going to be times that are going to stress you. There are going to be times that are going to stretch you. There are times that are going to hurt you. My advice today is that you be kind enough to yourself, that when those times come, that you don't beat yourself up. The guy said in a session the other day, if you were driving along and you hit a dog with your car, would you scream at the dog, tell the dog off? How dare you, dog? No, you'd be concerned. In fact, he told it better. He told it better than that. He said, you're driving along and you find a dog wounded on the side of the road. I like that better because I was thinking that if I'm the one that hit the dog, maybe I would be mad. You find a dog on the side of the road. It's injured. What are you going to do with that dog? You're going to help it. You're not going to scold it for not being where it's supposed to be. You're not going to shout at that dog and tell the dog off. You're going to do whatever you can to get that dog some help. If you would do that for a dog on the side of the road, why wouldn't you do it for yourself? I'm grateful to my friend that used that analogy because I've tried and I'm starting to be kinder to myself. To say, some days I'm not okay. But you know what? That's okay. If you're not okay, my first advice is to be kind enough to yourself to admit that it's okay. Hey, it's all right that I don't feel good now. You're not hard on yourself. You're not beating yourself up. What is wrong with you? Pick yourself up. Just acknowledge, hey, something's wrong with me. And speak up. Talk to a friend. Talk to a co-worker. Talk to your spouse. Talk to somebody you love, somebody you trust. Call a helpline. Just chat to somebody. And you know what? It might be nothing. It might be something that you can just get off your chest and you are rolling. But it might be something deeper. It might be a sign that something needs to change in your life. If something's not okay, if you're not okay, be kind enough to yourself to not be angry at that feeling, that emotion, that state of mind. Be kind enough to yourself to say, you know what? Something is wrong, and that's okay. And I'm going to talk to somebody about it. That, for you, my friends, is my advice for this week. It is okay to not be okay. And if you're not okay, be kinder to yourself. Don't beat yourself up. Just speak up. Talk to somebody. That's going to do it for another Shattered the Podcast. Don't forget Marriage and Mental Illness coming up on Wednesday. It is a solo session. It's my 3 tips for a successful marriage. It's a controversial subject. We had a couple of people weigh in on it, and they were not happy with me. That's okay. STP Shattered the Podcast. You can check us out on all the socials. Subscribe, like, and share. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to Shattered the Podcast. I'd like to thank our producer, Meredith Brosnan, our executive producer, Torian Lau, and the band Adelaide for allowing us to use their song as our theme. Go to shatteredthepodcast.com for more information.